So we're going to go ahead and get started. Just have a few quick announcements to go through real quick, and then we'll turn it over to Bill to do his presentation. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So next month's meeting is on December 4th, so make sure you note that it's the first Wednesday, not the third like normal. Our sponsor asked us if we could move it, and it kind of makes sense to get it away from Christmas a little bit. So, so basically, what is that, 2 weeks from now? So, what we'll be doing at that meeting, so it'll be down at CASA, where we've met before, down on Jefferson, in their little meeting room or whatever. So they'll have their presentation. Our sponsor this quarter is EG Innovations. So they'll be doing a presentation, and then we'll be doing something similar to what we did last year at the year-end event, but obviously we don't have the funds that we had given to us last year, so the prizes won't be quite as good, but we do have a Nintendo Switch. We have 2 VMUG Advantages, and some other prizes that are yet to be purchased. So that'll be next, or 2 weeks. The day after that is the VMUG December virtual event. And I don't remember what was on the event agenda, but so you can go to the website to see that. It's the next slide. Is that anything? Oh, just a reminder about VMware Champions. So go ahead and you can check that out. I won't go over, I've gone over it a few times before, but just go to champions.vmware.com. And there's just lots of information on there. So VMUG Advantage memberships. I forgot to correct that slide. I did on the other one. Anyways, for renewal or for new memberships, make sure to use that code, the Fort Wayne 19. That'll get you 10% off. So instead of the 200, it'll be 180. Again, that's whether it's renewals or not. Now they do have a competition going on for the VMUGs, but we'll never catch the leaders because yeah, we're not even in the top 10. So, but so does everybody know? I know probably Daniel probably doesn't know what VMUG Advantage is, but does everybody else know what VMUG Advantage is? You've all been here because I've gone over it. But basically, I think, is there a next slide for that? Yeah. Basically, just real quick, VMUG Advantage includes lots of different things: VMworld discounts, certification discounts. But the biggest one, well, you can use Test Drive as well, which is new. So you can test drive some of the stuff. But the big thing is the eval experience, the stuff here in the middle. That's all the software you can get licenses for that you can load in your own test environment to be able to lab stuff up. So that's the main reason most people get it, is the license keys. So all right, and then of course I mentioned our sponsors for the quarter, EG, and they'll be here next month to do their presentation. So they're the fourth quarter sponsor, but they will also be sponsoring January because of different reasons. It was late getting them as a sponsor for the quarter, so we missed October. So it'll be, you know, these 2 months and then January. So I think that's all I had on there, right? Okay. So not a whole lot of announcements, but I will turn it over to Bill.
Good evening, everybody. Go ahead and get my presentation started here. All right. Again, good evening. Welcome to November's VMUG meeting. I want to still not screwed up already. Let's see here. Share. Okay, we're seeing it now. All right. One hiccup out of the way, many more to go. So again, Welcome to November's VMUG meeting here in Fort Wayne. My presentation tonight is going to be on infrastructure testing with Pester. Assuming most of you are probably familiar with PowerShell or PowerCLI in some capacity, is that correct? Okay, good. If I can get my slide to advance. No, they're not. So let's see here. Might help if I have the right window selected. All right. Well, we're going to do this manually then behind the podium. So probably wondering who I am. Obviously, I'm not very good at presentations. So my name is Bill Kindle. I'm a systems administrator by trade. Been doing this for about 15 years or so. I'm a contributor to the PowerShell Conference Book, Volume 2. I'm also a guest writer over at the Adam the Automator blog. If any of you are familiar with that blog, it's got a lot of great content. I'm also a content contributor at techsnips.io. I'm really into model railroading and trains. Recently just took my son to see the Nickel Plate Road 765, which was a fantastic little adventure. I'm the father of two wonderful, sticky little people who don't pay rent. They're great though. And I'm also a husband to a loving wife who would I'd be absolutely lost without. So enough about me. Going to go ahead and tell you guys, if you guys want to follow along with any of the examples I've got tonight, go ahead and scan the QR code, or I've got the Git clone code down there at the bottom if you want to use that instead. Hope that's big enough for everybody to see. Again, all the code samples, some screenshots are all available there on my repo. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go into a little bit of a story here, kind of give you some background on why I'm so into Pester. Every weekend I am in charge of quite a few maintenance cycles where I have to do a lot of manual processes. These processes can take anywhere from 5 minutes to 15 minutes to do and involve a lot of complex operations. Everything from stopping and starting particular Windows services in a particular order to working with Windows clusters, SQL clusters, starting and stopping IIS app pulls, working with websites, various versions of web servers like IIS, Apache, Nginx. The problem that I kept running into when I would do these maintenance cycles with my scripts is I would get confirmation that I shut services down. I would proceed with my maintenance cycle, and a few hours later I would run my scripts to start everything back up and do some basic tests on my own. Things would be working. I'd move on to the next project. Sometimes an hour or two later, my monitoring system would start going off with all kinds of alerts telling me that system services weren't running. Clusters were down, so on and so forth. And this would frustrate me because I knew I ran the script, I knew my script worked, but I didn't have any way to validate that actually did what I said it would do. So I was missing a way to validate all this. So after talking to a few PowerShell folks in various communities, I got turned on to Pester. And that's what my whole presentation is going to be about today. I'm going to talk to you about the dual purpose PowerShell module for both developers and sysadmins. So you're probably wondering, what is Pester? Back in the early days, when PowerShell first was being brought out to the masses, we didn't really have a testing framework like other languages like Python, for example, have built in. It was just a scripting language, and that was it. So as more and more people began to start making their own functions, their own modules, it became necessary to have a testing framework. So that's how Pester came to be. It's a domain-specific language. So how many of you are familiar with like HTML, CSS, those kinds of language, XML, SQL? Okay. Those are all DSLs. The language is usually pretty simplistic, only has a few nuances and whatnot that you need to know, but otherwise it doesn't take long to pick up on the language. Pester also began to be shipped with Windows, PowerShell version 5, I believe. So it's in every version of Windows starting with Windows 10 and up. So it's there by default. And I believe the default version is like 3.4. Their latest and greatest version right now is actually 4.9. So, but it's in every version of Windows PowerShell. I don't believe it comes with PowerShell Core, but in the new version of PowerShell, it's supposed to be there as well in PowerShell 7. Pester also works really well with your continuous integration and continuous development pipelines, such as Jenkins, TeamCity, Azure DevOps. So if you have devs that want to test their modules, you can actually integrate those Pester tests into that pipeline. But Pester is not just for testing PowerShell code. It actually has another use case, and that's testing infrastructure. So let's talk a little bit more about testing infrastructure. I'm sure everybody knows a Patrick in some form or another, but we're not cave dwellers. We have technology, and we should be able to use it. So let's go over a few reasons why testing is important. Anybody got any ideas why we should test, especially test infrastructure? Liability. You get a sticker. There you go. All right, so we got liability. Anybody else? Why would we want to test our infrastructure, especially after making changes? Justin?
Sure works.
Exactly. Because every now and then, we'll have a little thing called human error. I've been guilty of that. I've made changes before where I didn't test them properly or not thoroughly enough, I should say, and it's come back to bite me pretty hard. Another, this is another one too that just kind of hits close to home. You should always test because if you don't test, it costs you money and time, period. There's been occasions where I've witnessed other systems not be tested fully, and it's actually violated SLAs by, an hour, which, dealing with the systems that I usually work with on a regular basis, an hour's worth of time can mean, hundreds of thousands of customers can't actually access systems. And therefore, that's a lot of angry people, especially at the DMV, which already has a bunch of angry people usually coming to us. So, it's money and time. This is the big one for me. Testing is just the right thing to do. We're all professionals. We should all test our infrastructure, test our code, and then test it again to make sure it does exactly what we want it to do. Nothing worse than, sharing a tool with somebody and say, hey, it works great on my machine, and then goes out, to another network and completely tears everything to shreds. So how many of you have checklists? Checklists for doing any kind of operation on your network or systems, servers, vCenter environments. So I want to kind of talk about turning those checklists into what I call testing as code. And you'll see why I say that here in a minute. But first, I'm going to have to give you a quick start on Pester. I promise this won't take very long, so if you're following along right now, this next slide is pretty much all you're going to need to follow in order to get it set up on your system. So if you open up Windows PowerShell, again, it's suggested you have at least 5.1. That's the latest and greatest out right now as far as Windows PowerShell goes. Or if you're a brave soul like me and you want to use PowerShell 7 Preview 5, it works great on that as well. So really the only command you need to have is the install module. Use my laser pointer here. Man, that really looks terrible up there. All right. All right. But anyways, yeah, it's install module. You know, if you want to use the parameter of name, Pester, that'll either do one of two things. It'll either go out to the PowerShell gallery and download the latest and greatest version, or it'll import the version that you already have on your machine. You can also save the module to a local path if you want. That's great if you've got systems that are segmented from the internet. You can copy and paste into your module's path. And then update module works the same way that, you know, updating Power CLI works. You run update Power CLI and it goes out and pulls the latest and greatest version down. Everybody got that? Need me to leave it up there a little longer? No? All right. Hey, now it's working. All right. So let's go over the basic syntax and structure of a simple Pester test. It's only 20 lines of code. This is the basic layout of a Pester test. So we'll start off with the first block here is a describe block. The describe block basically tells you, or you basically name it what your test set's going to be. So in this case, you know, it's my group of tests that I want to run. You'll notice I can also use tags, which is very useful. Next up, we have a context block. The context block is completely optional, if you will. You don't necessarily have to have it there, but if you're like me and you like to keep things organized, the context block actually comes in handy to keep your tests within a certain scope. And the next block is that this is actually where all the action happens, is within the it block. This is also known as the assertion. So essentially what we're doing here is we're calling the test by its name, and we're saying, okay, I'm going to set some parameters here that I'm going to use and some variables. So you'll see here that I'm running a simple get service on the bits command here. And then I use my variable that I assigned so I can get the member type property, which is just going to give me, it's just going to return the value of whatever the current status of that service is. I like to do it this way because it keeps my code, you know, short and sweet, pretty simple. And I only need a simple Boolean value anyway. So whether, you know, I just want to know if it's true or false, essentially. So getting your results down to a single value, it makes running Pester a lot easier. So what I do there, I just pipe out the result from there, send it down to should, and I say, you know, I want it to be exactly like running. And this test would pass on my system, especially if the bits service was running. Moving on to the next assertion block, this is a sample of one that would fail. And you'll see here that I've got it set to should be exactly stopped. Well, if it's not stopped and it's in the started state, this test fails. But if I was to change it around and say, you know, okay, I want it to be stopped, that test could pass. So there's a little nuances there you really got to think about when you're developing your test sets. So kind of stop and think about what you want the end result to actually be, and then word it appropriately. So that's essentially the, you know, like I said, the basic syntax and structure of a Pester test. It's nothing really involved. And just to reiterate the assertion blocks one more time, the assertion blocks contain what your expected state needs to be. So when you run your Pester test, what's expected is always going to show up in green. It's going to be your passing test. What's not expected should show up in red. Those are always failures. All right, so who's ready for demos? Sick and tired of me talking? Raise your hands. All right, honesty, I love it. All right, so let me switch gears here and go to my first demo. I'm going to show you my CentOS 7.6 box that I've got hosted out on DigitalOcean right now. It's already got Pester loaded on it, PowerShell 7, Preview 5 loaded up. And I'm going to run a short, sweet Pester test on that box. All right. So I've got Nano open here with my Pester test script. And one thing I want you to take note of right now, since Pester is compatible with PowerShell language, you'll notice I still end my test at the very top there with .ps1. How Windows knows, or Linux knows, that it's a Pester test is that your tests always end in whatever the file name is, .tests, plural, .ps1. At that point, the DSL knows what it's working with, and then we'll set up a describe block. So I'm just doing some local service testing. I break it down into the context, so my scope, and I say, I want to test network services. And then each of these it assertions, I've got little blocks of PowerShell code. It's actually interacting with the system and pulling service statuses from this Windows, or excuse me, not this Windows host, this Linux host. So I do that a couple of times. I jump down, I do another context, which is a different scope. I want to test, kdump service and make sure it's not active. And when I'm done with, writing my test, save the file. We'll go ahead and back out here. X. Got a little bit of delay here. All right. All right, connected my screen. PSH. Preview. Clear screen again. I'm going to go ahead and use the invoke-pester command, followed by the parameter of script. And I'm going to point it right at that demo script that we just viewed in Nano. When I hit enter, the test begins to run. And you can see there that within a matter of, see, it says 0.99 seconds. So just under a second, I performed 3 really quick tests just against this host alone. Now you can easily make this test work on remote systems as well and pull that information back to your console session. I didn't do that here. Obviously, I'm just on the local machine, but you can have a litany of tests ready to go that are already in code. And every time you are working with the machine, if there's certain things you're looking for that you need to ensure are there and validate them, all you have to do is just run your Pester test. And for every new situation that you run into, say, like, hey, I don't have a test for that, you don't have to go out and create a new file every time. You can open up your same test file, just add a new line to the bottom of it and a new context block or another assertion, save the file, and you're good to go. So that's useful in a lot of different ways. You can then put that out in your Git repo, or whatever your version control system is, and everybody's going to have that same exact test to run. It's pretty handy. Okay, let me go to the next slide here. All right, you might have heard me grumbling about this earlier, my domain controller test. I'm actually pretty proud of this one. This started off from a little minor issue that I had with testing some domain controllers. I was kind of sick and tired of running repa-admin just by myself all the time and only being able to do it against one machine. So I whipped up a small little PowerShell script that would hit, a number of domain controllers all at once, and was like really happy about it because it worked great. I put it out on my GitHub repo, tweeted about it. Jeffrey Snover picked up on it, retweeted it, so a few more eyeballs got on it. Next thing you know, I had somebody fork the repo, and within a matter of a couple hours, like rewrote it a little bit and changed it in such a way that you didn't have to have any variables put in it. You just run it on your network. And as long as you're a domain admin that's got the appropriate level of permissions to view your domain controllers, you could run it. It would automatically detect them and run repa-admin on all of them and report back all your tests. It's phenomenal. I wish I could show it live here. Unfortunately, I can't because my client Hyper-V systems are not communicating with each other, and I didn't quite have enough time to troubleshoot them further. So let me go ahead and show you the screenshot that I have on my GitHub repo of what that test actually looks like. So as you can see here, we tested a couple of domain controllers in this Evotech domain. I've got a few different contexts, so it tells me everything that you want to know about your Active Directory forest and environment. And of course, these are all green, so this domain's pretty healthy. All the replication is working. It gives you, the target DSAs, the status for all that. I mean, it's a pretty robust test. I mean, we've even got a section specifically for replication status between, multiple domain controllers. Check for availability. Yeah, so there was a few of them there, but you get the idea. That's what the test actually looks like if I was able, to run it on my host machine and run it for you live. If any of those had a problem, they would show up, with a little minus mark and they would be red, and usually it would tell you the exact error message below it. So if there, was a problem sending that particular command, or it shot out some kind of other error message, it would give you a little bit of a hint there what was going on and allow you to troubleshoot it further. Okay, go back here. And I'll show you that code just so you can kind of see what it is. Go here. And that's the wrong tab. Full screen this again so we can see it a little bit easier. Okay, so you can see here, if you're, like I said, if you're familiar with PowerShell, you're going to notice a lot of this is going to start to look very familiar really quick. In between, we'll have, some of our it assertions, some of our context blocks, our describe blocks always at the top. You'll see here that, we can run this by itself. You'll see up here that we're importing the module. We run our describe block. We can run try catch blocks within that, run all of our PowerShell code that we want. Go down to it assertions and just continue on. This, like I said, this entire script is available on my GitHub repo. So if you want to take a look at it, read about it, maybe try it out in your lab environment, feel free to go ahead and grab a copy of it. So I'm going to show you now a real live infrastructure test that I do. It's all redacted, so there's nothing in there that is confidential or anything. But it's pretty much the exact same thing that I have to run through on a few environments on a monthly basis. And you'll see some of the things I have to work with right now. So let me go ahead and switch over to that code. I'll walk you through how I do it. Presentation mode, there we go. Make that a little bit bigger. So you'll see that I like to try to keep my code a little clean, like to space things out, but you'll see that same syntax, same structure that I showed you earlier. I start out with describe blocks. I go down into my different scopes for my context, and then I start along with my assertions. So this first one here, I'm using the generic bits term here, but there's a service that I have to check for that's a proprietary service that I have to make sure is stopped so the system actually starts to go down and can't be accessed while I'm doing maintenance on it. You'll see here, I've got the server assigned, I run my PowerShell code, same thing, I'm looking to see if the service is running or not. And these tests are run after I do my maintenance. They're not run before. You could run test, to test, make sure everything was running before you started maintenance if you wanted to. You just have to go through and change a few variables. But scrolling down here, see if I can find a web app pool. So yeah, I'm using native PowerShell commandlets. I believe that one is with the web administration module, which is actually a little bit deprecated now. If you're working with IIS servers on Windows now, you should be using the IIS administration module, but that's kind of a little bit outside of the scope right now. But see, I'm looking for a particular app pool name. I need to make sure it's actually started up, and scroll down here a little bit more. And I keep running through that. I'm looking for application pull states, quite a few of them. I also have to test HTTP status codes for certain websites. So I'll go out to either a HTTPS site or an HTTP site, and I'm basically just looking for the status code 200. If it's anything other than 200, I know I've got a problem. So if I've got like a 401, file's missing or something somewhere, 404, something else is wrong, or if I got, which I actually run into quite a bit, the 500 status codes, usually a permissions issue that is, has to do with the account that I'm running this script under. But usually that doesn't happen. But again, I'm just using basic built-in PowerShell commands inside the DSL. I think I skipped ahead. Nope, I'm right exactly where I needed to be. So far, has anybody got any questions? Want to have, discussion or? Yeah.
So if those tests were part of like a pipeline or whatever, instead of like displaying your console, like what does it return? Like how would I programmatically look at the results?
Well, you can do it one of a couple different ways. You can either, stare at the screen and view console output, or there's something I can actually show you a screenshot of. I'll talk a little bit about here because I really can't show you too much of it. There's a tool called extent.exe, which if you're familiar with .NET programming at all, you've probably heard of that tool. It basically works off of the in-unit XML output that the Pester module can send that output to. And you can create like actual HTML reports out of it. But you can take that XML and you can import it into anything that can read that file format. So if Jenkins is able to read that, you could pipe that directly into it. But yeah, it does have the ability to export that as XML basically. Anybody else? No questions? And
Will you use this as a monitoring service? Like schedule it or something?
you could. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but the way I use it right now, I've already got another monitoring service in place. So I just basically use it as an additional check before I turn monitoring services back on. Anybody else in here use Zabbix or ever considered using Zabbix? Okay, I'll talk a little bit about that. Just from the maintenance aspect, I go in every month and I'll set up Zabbix to have maintenance times, or maintenance periods is what they call them. And basically during those maintenance periods, it ceases all alerts. So it's still collecting data, but the alerts are not going out to anybody. So I'll set that to, maybe 4 to 5 hours. So I'll be doing my maintenance cycles, and my maintenance cycle will actually end with all my scripts that are scheduled as PowerShell jobs about an hour before that maintenance period in Zabbix, is done. So this Pester test comes out and it says, hey, all your services, all your websites, everything in that environment is back up and running like it should be. That way, when monitoring turns back on, it's not just going nuts with alerts right off the bat. And that's one of the problems that I had initially before I even got with Pester, is that I would go through and I would do some manual checks. And, after you do about 15 of these a weekend, you're starting to kind of go through them, and sometimes you get tired, you miss one step. And that one step could be like, oh, you didn't start an IIS app pull for one website. And, there you are getting alerts about it after the fact, and you have to scramble and go back and sometimes start all over again with your checklist and run through everything, which takes, additional time to do. So yes, you could use it as a monitoring tool if you wanted. I wouldn't recommend it, but you know, it depends on your use case. So it's a versatile tool. I have used it to test a couple of vCenter environments, making sure that a couple of settings, especially with VUM, were enabled. It's not just limited just to PowerShell infrastructure testing or Windows systems. Like I said, you can do this with Linux, Mac OS. You do it with Windows. It's basically your infrastructure. So you can even, if you're writing config files to routers, you can actually test your routers too, and make sure that those configuration settings have actually taken place. So it's not strictly like an OS infrastructure test. You can, anything that PowerShell can talk to, Pester can test. So.
How do you, where do you usually run this stuff from? I know this every little bit.
Well,
Are you running server that has access to all these things?
I've got a couple of different ways to run it. I've run some of them from my workstation. I've run some of them from a management system that I have in an environment where I have basically scheduled jobs set up that just run in the background and periodically send me HTML reports. So it really just depends on your use case again. Wherever you've got the module installed, you can run it. Yeah.
How do you call upon this? Like, let's say I do an upgrade script, and then at the end, I want to run a Pester test. Can you just call a Pester PS1 straight from the execute, like the installer PowerShell script?
Well, if you already had your test set configured, you already had your script there, your test.ps1 file, yes, you can actually call that script directly. And if you've already got the module installed, PowerShell recognizes it and says, hey, I know what that is, and runs it. The only difference that you'll notice though is the output's slightly different. So you might not get as much of the verbose output that you would if you did the invoke Pester, but you're still going to get the information whether the test passed or failed.
Okay. Do they have any kind of like built-in verbose logging that you could like spit out to a, I think you said XML document. Is that basically the extent of it? I mean, can you just drop it into a text file, etc.?
I've had mixed results with dropping it in text files, and I'll be honest with you, I've never really even considered using it that way. So it's one of those things I would say try it out, see if it works for you. But you can also start transcript too. I believe that'll actually capture some of that output. So it just depends on what you want. But I mean, really, it's already verbose out of the box. So it just depends on what you want to do with the data afterwards. I see some gears turning. No? All right. Well, I'll talk about a few more additional resources to help you learn more about Pester. Got more QR code action for you here. This website right here has a really, really lengthy article on using Pester, both in infrastructure testing and testing your PowerShell code if you so wanted to use it to do that. And my personal favorite, the Pester book, this is actually the one that helped me the most when I first started getting into infrastructure testing. There's a small section in the book on that, and you can get that directly from LeanPub. Again, the QR code takes you directly to that site. But very good book. I'd strongly recommend it, especially if you're getting serious about wanting to use it more and more. Cut me off here. Okay. This module right here, PS Cones, is a good example of how Pester was used to create a learning module for learning PowerShell. The entire module will have you walk through different scenarios and have you change code and or what they call cones. It's little, tiny little scenarios. Says, like, okay, go and change this variable and see what output you get. it validates what you change in the scripts using Pester on the back end, the entire module. It's pretty fantastic. But I highly recommend taking a look at that, especially if you want to, get an idea of how, Pester is used to test modules. Also decided to throw this in here too. The Pester module has been around, I believe, since 2010. It's gotten progressively better over time, of course. So if any of you are so interested in tossing a little bit of coin towards the developers' way, there's a direct link where you can do that. Keeps the module, rolling. They do have full-time jobs as well, but they make a wonderful product there, and they've kept it free. All right. I know I've probably bored a few of you to tears. I apologize. I'm not a professional presenter. It's been about a year since I did this particular presentation. Last group was only 9 people, and it was people I worked with for 3 years. So thank you for bearing with me. I know we had some technical glitches. I'm going to have this entire PowerPoint presentation up on my GitHub page this evening. So if you guys want to take a look at it, clone it, use it for later. If you want to have something to reference back to, it'll be available there. Also, I'm on Slack. So if you guys ever have any direct questions about Pester or want to, bounce some ideas off of me, I'm always available, willing to help on any of those questions that you might have. So, yes, Justin. Okay, let me go back here. All right. And if,
No, the book.
oh, the book. Okay. You said one slide. Okay. Let's go back a couple more slides. All right. A little bit of a delay. There we go. So yeah, the Pester book. I can't remember. I might not have mentioned this already, but this is actually, I think, the only Pester book in existence, and it's been endorsed by Jeffrey Snover, the father of PowerShell. So again, very good book. Highly recommended it.
So this is included with some versions of PowerShell, but it's not actually maintained by Microsoft.
No, it's not maintained by Microsoft, but it is a module that Microsoft supports. Yeah, like I said, it's in every version of Windows PowerShell, I believe, starting at version, I want to say it was version 4.0, they started including it, but I do know for sure it is actually there with 5.1 and up. Mhm.
There's actually some additional steps you have to take though, install the latest.
Yeah, the
After 1809.
I think it's a allow clobber, if I'm not mistaken, because it.
Basically, they said in version, Windows 10 version 1809 and higher, they have a cleanup step, basically removing the old version of Pester, because it won't update the in-place version of Pester.
Right. Yeah. I usually just always copy mine in. That's why when I do it, I usually just run save module, manually put it in my module path and import it that way.
It's on GitHub though.
Yep. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you again. That's it.
All right. I don't have a whole lot of else to go over other than just a reminder about our meeting next month. We'll big grub down there at CASA. Anybody else have anything we need to talk about or go over? Everybody get the new sticker, new coaster? Turned out pretty good. Good job, Devin.
I didn't notice the van, I didn't see van work included.
It's in there. It's underneath the design there. Just got to look really close.
It's that blue triangle right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I know there's something I was supposed to say. Yeah. I said we had a call today and they talked about something we were supposed to mention. Yeah, there was something else though. Virtual events, December 5th. Easter days. Yeah. Yeah, I'll mention it. I don't think that was it, but yeah. So next year they're going to be doing something new called vSphere Days. So it sounds to me similar to a UserCon, but it's only about vSphere related, and they're only going to do it in like 10 cities. They didn't list the city and area, but it just says Central Ohio. So there's okay. I know. So anyways, we don't know the dates yet. They said they have them and they're going to get them to us. So we'll let you guys know so you can put those on your calendar. There's lots of food left, so make sure to go back and eat some more. Spend some time networking and such. And anybody have any questions or anything? Nope. All right. Thanks again, Bill, for presenting for us.
Thanks for putting up with me again.
Yeah, good job.